Anyway, so before we get to that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our posse today. First up, we have Jaron from Jaron. How you doing today, Jaron?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
Awesome. I'm glad you're with us today. Are you ready to bust some globes?
Yeah, I sure am.
Awesome. Okay. Okay, guys. In case you didn't notice, that is not the Jaron from Jaronism. Jaron from Jaronism is sick today, unfortunately. He gave me a text earlier and said that he was almost delirious with, he was so sick, high fever and everything. So I don't know what's going on with that. So I thought I'd have my son Jaron pop in for just a second. So Jaron, I'll let you go back to playing games, and we will move on to the rest of the group. So next up, we have John the Morgile. How you doing today, John?
Doing great, Bob. Doing great. Thank you so much for asking. Beautiful day, beautiful weather today, and yeah, glad to be here with you guys.
Awesome. Glad to hear that. Okay, so I got my chief tech. Oh, there it is. I got my chief tech working on the screen share here, and hopefully that'll come up here in just a second. All right. Beautiful. And Irlanducci is, of course, being fashionably late today, which is no surprise. There we go. Now we got it on the live feed. It was a little OBS glitch or whatever. So, OBS has been doing that a lot lately, and there was a little bit of a update that got installed today. So I would imagine that's what kind of messed up the screen share that I've got. So anyway, we will move on. Next up, we have Mike Kavanaugh from FE Core, president of FE Core, and he is with us today to help talk a little bit about the mechanics of the fiber optic and ring laser gyros, and also some mechanical gyro tidbits. So how are you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Bob.
All right, beautiful. And last but not least, we also have another member of FE Core with us, and his name is Stefan. And Stefan, the reason he is on today is he has created for FE Core a magnificent gyroscope. And I mean, it is absolutely unreal. It's beautiful workmanship. It's very, very free turning. In fact, he can spin it up to like 10,000 RPM, which of course would scare the heck out of me. We're going to be seeing some pictures of that and some video, but he's going to be talking about that a little bit. So I just want to welcome Stefan to the group. How are you doing today, Stefan?
Hello, thank you for the invitation. I'm doing very well, thank you.
Okay, beautiful. All right, sounds good. So I guess we'll go over to Nathan. Nathan, you're so distracted. You're on video, and I keep looking at you. But so Nathan has kind of been covering some of this gyroscope stuff on his show, the Flat Earth Debates, over on the Nathan Oakley 1980 channel. And, you got to love his show. I love tuning in the morning and, kind of waking up and listening to the debate, you guys talking to each other, and absolutely destroying the ballers. But the last few days, I've noticed that you have been talking about the fiber optic gyro, and there's obviously a lot of controversy about it. I heard Brenda von Ossen on there trying to tell you today some of the things about it, that it was absolutely detecting the rotation of the Earth. Of course, that is absolutely false. We'll be proving that today. But I just wanted to tell you, first of all, great job on your show. I've become a big fan of it, and so is Jaron. I know all of us have. And yeah, so just wanted to let you have the opportunity to say a little bit about your show and what's going on, and what you think about all this behind the curve stuff.
Okay. Well, you've prefaced all I need to. I mean, I don't want to plug my show too much. If I may, I'd like to just launch into my bit. Is that okay by everybody on the panel?
It's fine with me.
You
Do
sure?
your thing.
Okay, right. Well, I'll try and keep this as brief as possible, but in real terms, the term science has been hijacked, and it started at school for all of us. So we've had an empirical method given to us and taught to us, which is fairly simple, and the end result cognitively is that we understand that when science, being a method, is applied, we prove things. We have an empirical method of proving the cause of an effect. In the same class, the following day, you open page 38 and it shows you the molten iron core. So you are told with the banner of science, that a just so story fits into the same category. And this is where science has been hijacked. So science is a method, and that method is based on the observation of phenomena and trying to establish the cause of that effect. So the effect is your phenomena, also known as dependent variable, and you are trying to establish the cause of that effect. And the cause is your independent variable. And the way you do this is to formulate scientific predictions, otherwise known as hypotheses. Now, a scientific prediction will establish your presumed cause of the effect. So what you think causes the phenomena. It will also have two sides to it. A null hypothesis being your zero difference result. So you've got two sides. One proves that you have got the correct assumption of the independent variable, otherwise known as presumed cause of the dependent variable, the effect. So science is exclusively interested in the physical and natural world, or phenomena, effects that take place in the physical and natural world. So step one in the scientific method is to observe a phenomena. Step two being formulate a scientific prediction or hypothesis. Step three being to actually validate or invalidate the hypothesis, your prediction, your presumed cause of the effect. So once you've observed a phenomena, you formulate a hypothesis, and then you perform another part that's often hijacked, systematic experimentation. Now, the systematic experimentation stage is the validity given to your hypothesis if you have validated a cause of an effect. Now, that repeated aspect is often used in the hijacked version of science when people declare that you must repeat an observation. And that in itself is a hijacking of a part of a step in the scientific method, i.e. formulation of a hypothesis followed by systematic experimentation. So this being the case, the scientific method being established way of empirically proving causation, you can then go forward and actually prove things as the causes of an effect. So this may cause a problem for people who have invested a lot into what they believe to be a scientifically valid experiment. Now, an experiment, as I've just explained, is a hypothesis test. That is, by definition, what a scientific prediction goes forth to be validated as an experiment. And the claim has been made, no offense to you, Bob, but by Bob, that you have an experiment, a gyro experiment, and you do not. This is incorrect. It's not an experiment. The gyroscopes are in absolutely no way, shape, or form scientifically valid. They're not proving the cause of an effect. Now, what I mean by that is you can formulate what you are observing in two different ways, and this was should be the end of it. It should be so telling when, ultimately speaking, what is perhaps, and maybe be corrected in this, the original assertion that if the gyro displays no drift, then the Earth is not turning, can ultimately be switched when you do observe drift to it being the observation of the star rotation. Well, in and of itself, you shouldn't really be able to substitute the cause of something so easily, and that is why it's essentially not an adherence to the scientific method. You're determining what the effect of a gyro deviating is, and if the effect that's being observed is gyroscope drift, then that's not a natural phenomena. So that's the first way that it falls short of being scientifically valid. You're not actually formulating the hypothesis with a natural phenomena if you are to assert that the dependent variable is the gyroscope. In other words, the phenomena of gyroscope drift is what you're observing as the dependent variable. If that's the case, what you assert to be the cause of the effect, star rotation, would not be variable or manipulatable by you as a researcher. So you can't validate that cause of that effect, even though it wouldn't be classified as an effect because it's a man-made device. So the flip side of that is the globe head assertion in terms of what the gyroscope does. So they would assert that if they see a 15-degree rotation in the gyroscope, then it is caused by the Earth turning. Well, again, the effect being the man-made device, a gyroscope, is definitely not scientific. It's not a naturally occurring phenomena, unless of course somebody can take me to their naturally occurring gyroscopes. I'm pretty sure you won't. So again, it falls short in that regard. However, you can do the same. You can substitute the dependent and independent variables for one another and say that you're actually observing the naturally occurring phenomena of Earth rotation. Well, number one, nobody is observing Earth rotating. Nobody's flying out into the second law of thermodynamics violation known as the vacuum of the sky and observing Earth turning. So it's definitely not your dependent variable and observed phenomena. It is, in fact, again, the observation of a man-made device. So gyroscopes are not scientifically valid. They are not proving the cause of anything whatsoever. And I said before the show that I'd come on to the Foucault pendulum, and this is to illustrate how it's absolutely not the proof anybody has claimed in terms of anything, especially not Earth rotation. So the Foucault pendulum essentially has, as the Coriolis effect would suggest or dictate, in fact, an apparent drift. So to put it into layman's terms, you have a gyroscope that's swinging back and forth, and that doesn't deviate. It goes back and forth always like a pendulum. However, because the Earth rotates underneath the pendulum, you see an apparent drift of the pendulum. So to visually picture this, you have, if it's in a shopping mall, a great big ring of like domino looking things around it, and as the day or couple of days progresses, you'll see it go round in what looks like a circle. Well, that is happening because there is an apparent drift. They are in two separate reference frames. So because the Earth turns underneath the pendulum, you see an apparent drift, an apparent deviation from the swing. In other words, the swing maintains its back and forth motion and the Earth rotates underneath. That is by definition what gives you a Coriolis effect, as defined by the Foucault pendulum. If this was to be the case, and I'm sure Morgaugh's hovering over his microphone at this point, then we would have drastically different durations of air travel east to west and west to east, and we do not. If we have a Coriolis effect, you could take off in a helicopter and watch that second reference frame, the rotating Earth, go underneath the helicopter, and we do not observe this. So if you are to assert that the pendulum is moving back and forth and demonstrating an apparent deviation because the Earth turns underneath, then we must see a difference in journey times east to west and west to east, and we do not. So, for all the globehead muppets who watched this show and gleefully declared that Bob had scientifically validated that the Earth turns, they are scientifically illiterate. This is not scientifically validating that the Earth turns. This is not science. It has no independent and dependent variable when you reference it for a globe Earth. And if the effect that is being described in the gyroscope caused by the Earth rotating underneath, as demonstrated, apparently demonstrated by a Foucault pendulum, then ipso facto we must see differences in duration of air travel. In other words, the fact that we do not have a Coriolis effect is the reason why it disproves any assertion that a gyroscope or Foucault pendulum, for that matter, demonstrates in any way that we have a separate rotating reference frame underneath the atmosphere. That is what is necessitated and described in the Coriolis effect. We do not observe this, and we must, in order for either a gyroscope or a Foucault pendulum to be asserted as true, because they must have two separate reference frames in order for that to be logically sound. and we do not have two separate reference frames. You cannot take off from the ground in a helicopter and see the Earth rotating underneath. You do not have different durations of air travel, east to west and west to east. In short, we have no Coriolis effect. Absolutely necessary for this to be logically valid and in any way assert that it's demonstrating Earth turn or be correlated with the turn of the heavens. So unfortunately, gyroscopes are not science. And to round out my point in its most specific, my reason for being here, if you will, is to say it mostly to the people on the panel, which is to say this is a difficult conversation to have. It's the third one I've had, first being with John Savage about this exact subject, gyroscopes. Got a super chat from Peter Ward. Shout out to you, Peter Ward. But the second being with Dr. John D, and now this being the third. And that is to say that not through any fault of your own, but through the exact same education indoctrination that we all went through at school, we have been led to believe, correctly so, that the method of science, the scientific method, is empirical. It proves and validates a cause and effect relationship, not a what is question, but a cause and effect relationship. And you can prove your cause if you follow this empirical method. But as I said at the start, in the same classroom, having been told and explained how this empirical method works, you are told that the word of man, molten iron core being a great example, flick to page 35, you've got what a man says, a just so story, usually attached to an observation. So there's a whole list of them. Maybe I'll come back to them in a moment that I've got. In fact, I will dig it out right here, right now. The list is essentially of the pseudosciences, the people that cannot adhere to the scientific method. And they are the people that must hijack the word science to mean something else, i.e. observation followed by just so story, usually backed up by a piece of man-made equipment that
Can I
validates
just interject something, Nathan?
the assertion
Nathan?
that science has proven something.
Nathan?
So pseudoscience religions are paleontology, geology, anthropology, archaeology, evolutionary biology, theoretical physics, astronomy, astrophysics, and cosmology. So none of these are science. None of them can adhere to the scientific method. And in the case of people like Brian Cox, what they assert is science is simply observation of phenomena followed by a just so story. So this is where we, if we are to progress and not fall victim to the same charlatanism and pseudoscience as our pretender clown priest muppets of heliocentrism, then we must temper our language. We must not use incorrect and invalid terminology such as specifically, but not limited to, the word experiment. An experiment is a very specific thing. It's a hypothesis test. And in this instance, there is no valid hypothesis to be asserted alongside the gyroscope to make it scientifically valid, which is very unfortunate if you are to assert that it's an experiment, because it means you're a practitioner of, guess what, pseudoscience. And there's nothing wrong with a logical deduction. It can still be proven invalid. You have a methodology that can be used and is used to prove things empirically. But we've been deceived. We've had the terminology hijacked. And when it was hijacked, it meant that men could assert, potentially with a gadget, that what they say is true, what they say is fact, and what they say is empirical. Because science! Well, no. In reality, pseudoscience, non-adherence to the scientific method. And by definition, if you assert science but cannot adhere to that method, you are practicing pseudoscience. So that is what I want to make as clear as possible so that we too don't fall victim to it. Because if you do, you end up with the situation Bob finds himself in, where you have other pretender clown Muppets on the globe side who now throw it in your face that you have proven scientifically that the Earth spins, even though it's only backed by logical fallacy, just so stories, and observation not of phenomena but of man-made devices. So this is definitely not science. Gyros are not scientific proof of anything. And we are also guilty of hijacking the terminology when it's asserted to be an experiment. It isn't. If it was, and it was proving Earth turn, then we'd have to have a Coriolis effect, and we don't. So,
Nathan,
to summarize, thought this was some sort of scientific proof.
Hey, Nathan.
Hey, Nathan, are you able to hear?
Desire of scientific validity of Earth rotation. Unfortunately,
I don't think you, Nathan, are you hearing us?
And most certainly not.
I don't think Nathan's hearing us.
Mike, that's it. I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, Nathan, are you hearing us at all? I don't think you're hearing us. I don't think he is hearing us, Mike.
Check. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Nathan, you're not hearing us, so I don't know what's going on. But anyway, hopefully he'll figure it out here in a minute.
I was trying to interject all the time. The gyroscope is an instrument that detects rotation. That's all it is. It has nothing to do with science, and nobody, I think nobody on our side is actually claiming that.
Right. No, I know, and I also had some comments too. But first, I want to make sure that Nathan can hear us, as I don't know what happened, with that. But Nathan, are you able to hear us yet? Wow, that's crazy. I don't know what happened. Hopefully, he will figure it out. That if he's not hearing us, well, it's going to be, today is 3/3, right? It's March 3rd. It's Illuminati Day 33. So I guess they're just going to have it their way.
Right.
Absolutely crazy. Well, I know he cut off his camera, but that's so weird. All right. Well, you know what? Hopefully he'll come back on, but I will respond to basically what he said. And hopefully at some point he'll be able to come back to us when he figures that, okay, now we see your camera back on, Nathan. Are you hearing us?
Yes.
Oh, okay. We've been trying to talk to you for the last several minutes.
Can you hear me, Nathan?
Yes, I can hear you all. My preamplifier turned on, so I just couldn't hear you. Did what I say come through at all?
Yes, it did. It absolutely all did. And Mike wanted to throw a comment in there first, so Mike, go ahead and hit Nathan up with that. Mike, you're muted.
Comedy of errors.
Sorry. Yeah, it's really 3-3. Okay. What I was saying is, the gyroscope is an instrument that detects rotation. That's it. It has nothing to do with science, and I don't think anybody from our side is actually claiming that.
Yeah, and I would.
That's not true. Right. As soon as you use the word experiment, you're invoking science, because an experiment is a hypothesis test.
I'm not using the word experiment. We're testing with gyroscopes, and it detects rotation.
Yeah. So, let me kind of clear that up. I mean, you're right. In the strictest sense, you're absolutely correct, Nathan. I agree. You cannot necessarily call it an experiment. It would be more accurate to call it an observation. However, let me throw something by you, because, I mean, first of all, I got to tell you, Nathan, I hate you because you are so damn well spoken. I wish I could do half as well as you do in how eloquently you speak, but that's awesome. But anyway, so let me throw something at you. And that is, in order to turn this into experiment, we obviously, as you said, we've got to have the hypothesis, we've got to have an independent and a dependent variable and all that. So if we are looking at, what we were doing as experiments, right, then, obviously the first thing we're talking about is the one thing that we've observed is the motion being registered or something being registered by the gyroscope. Now, I would say that no, the gyroscope itself is not the dependent variable. However, would not changing the position and orientation of the gyroscope be considered an independent variable?
No. Position is not a cause of anything.
Well, it would be, what would happen is if you do that,
The effect, right?
it would cause, I wouldn't say that it would cause, but the net result of it would be, is that we would get different readouts from the gyroscope itself. So by varying the orientation and the position, we are effectively then changing the result of the rotation and the amount of rotation, the degree of it, and all that in the gyroscope itself. So I guess I'm not understanding why that wouldn't be considered an independent variable, as you're defining it.
Pop it into a hypothesis. So is your hypothesis if location, then gyro turn?
Well, I honestly don't know what the hypothesis would be, because, and again, I agree with you, it would be more accurately defined as an observation. But it's an observation where we are changing certain variables, i.e. the position of the gyroscope, orientation, etc. You could change it along different latitude lines. You can change it as far as vertical, horizontal, or somewhere in between type of orientation. So those would be things that you would actually, be providing as variables. But
what are latitude lines?
Well, latitude lines essentially would be considered, how far north or south with relation to the equator or the poles. I'm not saying.
So it's a concept.
It is. It's an arbitrary thing, but it's also part of our system of measurement that is used.
Sure. What I'm saying is, if you're to try and validate or give you a valid hypothesis, you're saying if position on a concept, then gyro turn. So the easiest way to establish if it's scientifically valid is to establish the main two things in a hypothesis if you ignore the control variables. And that would be, number one, the most important thing in any science. Step one, what is the observed phenomena? So that is the first question. So the experiment stage is the last stage. It's the validation of your hypothesis. And all a hypothesis does is establish an IV-DV relationship. That's all it's doing. So the first question I would ask to you is, what is the phenomena?
The phenomenon would be the rotation of the sky, I guess.
Okay, so your dependent variable, the thing that you are observing as the phenomena, is valid, is a rotation of the sky, a valid phenomena. So to do science, you now need to establish what your independent variable is. So what is the cause of star rotation?
Well, there you have it. Okay, so I see exactly where you're going with that. All right, so how about if we change the phenomena then to, if we can do this? And honestly, I'm not trying to troll you here. I'm trying to figure this out and how it actually would apply. But let's say that the phenomenon then was something to the effect of, when Rick, who is the guy that actually did the fiber optic gyro experiments, hooked up the gyro and was looking at the raw data on the output and was seeing this 15 degrees per hour rotation. So let's say we called that the phenomenon. Is that valid?
Well, it went wrong when you said the Rick. So,
the naturally occurring phenomena is the phase differential in light based on orientation. That's the naturally occurring phenomena.
Say that again, Mike. Natural phenomena is what?
The phase differential in light. Light is a naturally occurring phenomena, and there is a phase differential that you can measure and see.
Okay.
And John Quantum Eraser would absolutely agree with that, especially because of the quantum eraser experiment, right?
Sure. So you're saying the dV is the differential, correct?
Yeah, let's call it the phase differential that we believe to be brought about, by this Sagnac effect.
Okay.
Well, the cause, you'll have to establish the cause or isolate the cause of that phenomena that you're seeing. So the isolation of the cause is not done with a gyroscope, because you still have the open question at the end: what is actually rotating? You can make a case for both arguments. One is actually valid, and the other one has no corroborating evidence. So you're still left with an open ending, and that by definition cannot constitute a scientific experiment.
So where do we observe this phenomena?
In the interference pattern in the gyroscope.
So, but that means you're creating that phenomena then.
All right.
No, we're not creating it. We're not creating the phenomena because it's naturally occurring. We're just making it visible through an apparatus.
Yeah, that measures it. That is designed specifically to measure these type of things.
Okay.
But what it's measuring, of course, that is the item that's up for dispute here. Is it measuring Earth rotation or is it measuring ether rotation? And of course, like I said, there's a lot of evidence to show.
Sorry, Bob. Sorry, you've just inserted that. So we're getting somewhere because we're establishing what the dependent variable is, but you've just inserted those two things. So we're looking at a cause and effect relationship, and what I get so far is the phase differential of light is the effect that we are studying. We're not looking at.
I'm not trying to make a case for this to be scientifically valid. I'm just saying that there is a naturally occurring phenomena, but we cannot
absolutely.
We cannot establish the cause of that just by doing a gyroscope experiment, because you can still, well, like I said before, say the question or have the question at the end: what is actually rotating? And you cannot establish for a fact that it's Earth rotation, because there is, based on other systematic experimentation, zero corroborating evidence.
Right, and what I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when similar tests are done with mechanical gyros, this drift is not measured. And so I would just pose the question, and I think we've pretty much answered it already, but what is the difference between a mechanical gyro that's spun up to 1,000 RPMs and the ring laser or the fiber optics gyro? And in my layman's view of this, the mechanical gyro is operating on an inertia principle, while the ring laser gyro, or the fiber optic gyro rather, is reading phase differentials in these laser beams. And so physically, I think that we would see this rotational drift in the mechanical gyros if it was actually occurring. And so that leads me to believe that it must be something else. And I think that something magnetic, because I think we can all pretty much agree, globers and flat earthers alike, that the Earth itself has a rotational magnetic field that is more or less centered along the North Pole. So I think that's a big clue, is the fact that mechanical gyros do not show this drift.
Well, there's a big difference, that the method of detection is completely different. The other one has one has moving parts, and the other one is based on light. Optical and mechanical. It's two different things. You cannot compare them on any level.
Other than the name, I guess, right?
Yeah, well, they both have the gyroscope behind it, but when you say gyroscope, most of the people see a spinning flywheel. But an optical gyroscope it has no moving parts in that regard. There is no flywheel.
Right, and the other thing also is that I will go along and I will agree with Nathan and say that yes, it's not an experiment, it's an observation, but we're also doing this observation with a proven piece of technology that is used every single day for navigation. It's used in airliners. It's used in submarines. It's used by the military. And not only that, it's extremely precise. And what it does is it measures motion and orientation. Okay. And so this is far past the science stages as far as being any type of experimental thing. We're looking at it as, a measuring device, much like, you take a multimeter and you put it on a battery and you measure the voltage. It's actually an indicator. It's something that measures something. That's how it's being used in this particular case. Now, the thing that's being measured, now that of course is the thing that is in question here. And like you said, Nathan, yes, it can be a couple of different things. It might be the rotation of the Earth. If we were actually on a spinning ball, then yes, if that was actually true, then I have no doubt whatsoever that this would be measuring. We could classify it as measuring the motion of the Earth. However, the thing that we have learned about laser interferometry is that it also confirms the existence of what science has known for hundreds of years, and that is the existence of the ether. Okay. And the ether has been calculated. It even one of the videos I was showing that there's even a distinct measurement of, the density of the ether. We know a lot about the characteristics. It's something that's taught in electrical engineering. It's something that is taught and measured and experimented with to this very day in the 21st century, even though the Einstein believers would like to have you believe that the ether doesn't exist. It absolutely does. And it was proven, to exist by the Sagnac experiment. And the Sagnac effect, of course, is something that all modern day fiber optic gyros and ring laser gyros work on today, right? And all of these airliners are navigating by it. Now, one other thing I think that came up, in one of your discussions, is one of the guys was saying, well, no, airplanes only have mechanical gyros in them, which of course is not true at all. When I first started flying, back in 1978, we didn't have the fiber optic gyros or ring laser gyros, and everything was simply a mechanical gyroscope. And, from the time that the Wright brothers flew their first plane, up through all the years, up even until when I got my pilot's license, which wasn't very much later, by the way. No, okay. But navigation worked great, and it all worked beautifully based on mechanical gyroscopes, because they are inertially based instruments. Their claim to fame is rigidity in space. And, whether or not we can actually validate a scientific hypothesis, dependent variable, independent variable, obviously I'm clearly not qualified to speak on that. All I know is that they are being used, they are proven technology, and they're being used today in the 21st century. And that is precisely the context in which F.E. Core, or I should say Rick, was doing his observations with. So I will concede, Nathan, that it was not an experiment, but more accurately described as an observation. And as far as the rest of it, I'm not really sure how to answer it. So.
And I would just pose a couple things. One would be a question, and maybe we could all take a stab at answering it. And I'm not going to participate, but a lot of people ask, what is the ether? And I could probably tell you what I understand the ether to be, but that is a big question that comes up a lot. What exactly is this ether? And here's the other thing that I was thinking. I wonder if we could put together an experiment that can show one way or another whether a rotational magnetic field can cause drift or precession in the fiber optic gyro. And my prediction would be that a rotational magnetic field can indeed, and I don't know what sort of power you would need and what sort of a device you would need to do that, but I think that would be interesting, since we do have accessibility or the available fiber optic gyro.
Well, the fiber optic gyro was already placed in a zero Gauss chamber, and it didn't affect the rotation at all. So it's definitely not magnetic in nature. And if I were to describe what the ether is, light or electromagnetic waves need to propagate in something. You can't wave in nothing. Mm-hmm. So, there has to be a medium for those waves to exist, and that medium is the ether. And what it is exactly, nobody knows, I guess.
Right. So is it safe to say that if you have, let's say, a vacuum chamber, the ether would still permeate that vacuum chamber, or is it a physical
Absolutely.
substance? Or yeah,
Absolutely.
so
And,
it's sort of
and we figured that out, by our experiments using the we never encased it in bismuth, but we did put it in a zero Gauss chamber, which is essentially kind of like a Faraday cage. It's a magnetic EM quiet zone. Okay. And the closest description I could say that electrical engineering defines the ether as, and this was brought to us by Eric Dollard, is that the ether or dielectric energy is an energy that is at 90 degrees from every single point on an electromagnetic wave. Okay. Now, we can measure it. We can prove that it's there. We've done so by the Michelson-Gale experiment, which, I'm sorry, not the Michelson-Gale experiment, but the Sagnac experiments proved that the ether is actually there. And even though the Einstein followers will try and discount that, it's been proven over and over and over again. Like I said, today we're using the technology that uses the Sagnac effect, which is the very thing that proved the ether to exist. So, so I guess, that's kind of where we're going with that. Go ahead.
Bob,
Yeah.
Bob, so no, this is not scientifically valid either. The Sagnac experiment is not a scientific experiment. If you can tell me what the independent and dependent variable is for that, I'll, take you through how it's not science. Again, the other thing you've done is you've just declared quite openly and boldly that science says the ether is real. So science is a method. It doesn't say anything. And you've promptly taken us to Dollard, who has told you what's what. And then you've declared that that's science also. And it's not.
Okay,
So
well,
science... Okay, this is a hard task.
I
Very
understand
hard.
what you're saying, Nathan, but we have technology that exists on this science today.
I'm sorry. This is a really hard task for me, Bob. You can probably hear it in the quiver in my voice. This is not something I want to do. You're wrong.
Okay.
This is not science at all. And you are reifying science into what men say. You are now guilty of what I went through at the start of the show. So what Dollard says is definitely not science. Science is exclusively interested in observation of naturally occurring phenomena. And if you can isolate the cause of that phenomena through systematic experimentation, then you are performing the scientific method. What Dollard says about what he sees is not science. The Sagnac experiment is not an experiment. It does not have an observed phenomena. Mike's tried to claim that it is, but I'm yet to hear where we observe this phenomena in the physical and natural world. So far, I've been told it's observed in the experiment. Now, without causing too much offense, this is what I take apart on a daily basis when it's asserted that what's being observed in the Cavendish experiment is observed within the experiment. The first step is to observe a phenomena, then presume your cause and vary that cause to cause the effect. And if you do, and you can systematically experiment and repeat it, and anybody can replicate it, then you validated a cause of an effect. The problem is that method is empirical. What Dollard says is just what he says about what he sees, and that's not science.
Okay,
that's
and
where we're duped.
Nor am I claiming that what Dollard says is science. I simply said that that is his explanation for what it is. I'm not claiming it's science, Nathan. And look, if you're going to go down this road and talk about it this way, look, we know that this is technology that is in use today. It works. Period. Okay. So
technology is not science.
I'm not saying that it is. It's technology is what it is. Look, how would you, if I was to say, look, I've got this meter here and it's called a voltmeter and I put it on a battery, are you going to tell me that that's not, you can tell me that's not science. And I would say, okay, great. I agree. That's not science. What it is an instrument that's measuring and telling me the electromotive force difference of potential between the two battery points. Now, why you want to bring argument of science into that is beyond me, because we already know it works. It is a piece of test equipment. So, if you're going to try and invalidate this fiber optic gyro, then I would ask you then to invalidate a voltmeter or an ohm meter, based on your same scientific premise. And if you're able to do that, then what you're telling me is that all of technology is now invalid because it doesn't fit the scientific method. And to that, I say bullshit.
That's a false equivocation fallacy, Bob. It's like battling with a baller. That's a false equivocation. Those two are not the same. Technology is not science. You did not.
I'm not saying it is, Nathan.
Maybe I can come back when you're a bit less triggered about this.
I'm not triggered. I'm saying that I am not saying.
My sentence, Bob.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
You did not perform a voltmeter experiment, did you?
No, but Nathan, now you're putting words in his mouth. Bob did not say that he was doing a voltmeter experiment.
No worries. Is it called the Sagnac experiment?
It's called the Sagnac effect.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike. Bob, is it the Sagnac experiment?
Well, if you're referring to the placard that's showing, it says the Sagnac experiment, yes.
Right. Therein lies the problem. We have been deceived into what is and is not science. And what is declared as men, what they say is science, isn't necessarily an adherence to the empirical method that establishes the cause, independent variable, of an effect, dependent variable.
What has that to do in relation to measuring devices and technology?
Nothing.
Well, then why are we talking about it?
Well, why are we having this discussion then?
Well, because it's being called an experiment. Like this gyroscope was called an experiment. When it is not.
Well, it's not.
And we've conceded that.
Why am I being attacked? I didn't call it an experiment, did I, Mike? Did I call it an experiment?
I'm not saying.
Why is everyone jumping on me? Yeah, okay.
Nathan, we're not calling. We capitulated and said, okay, great. It's not an experiment. It's an observation. We have capitulated that point. Where are we going with this?
My issue being you've then gone on within moments to say that science proves the ether, correct?
Well, I think you can find a scientifically valid method that can validate the ether, but it doesn't exist yet. And I think nobody's claiming that.
Please, I beg of you. I was just told that it was validated by the Sagnac experiment. That was what was said. This is my issue. The terminology of science, meaning the establishment of a hypothesis, scientific prediction, to validate or invalidate a cause of an effect, has been hijacked to mean observation with just so story, or phenomena being described as man-made devices. In other words, not step one, observe a natural phenomena, but claim an experiment, in quotes, prove something. No,
you're going down this route again, but by this point I'm going to have to ask you to quote me on when I'm saying that it's an experiment, because I've never said that.
Not Mike. I'm trying to talk to Bob, and it's like you're defending his honor.
No, I can understand that Bob used the word experiment because that's a common terminology used, but he also conceded on this show multiple times that it's not an experiment.
Okay, that's wonderful. However, moments later, he declared quite boldly, science proves the ether.
Okay. All right.
More choice of maybe.
Then obviously this is a battle of semantics then, and I don't.
No. How dare you? Words have meanings, Bob.
I get that, Nathan.
Using these words, and I tell you what, guys. If I'm going to get talked over the entire time, I did this for a week with Dr. John D, a PhD scientist. He conceded I was correct at the end. And the reason I'm doing this, challenging though it clearly is because what is happening is the very reason we have been deceived by practitioners of pseudoscience, men in white coats who observe phenomena and declare science says that light in the sky is a gas in a vacuum. Why? Because I declare it, because I've done experiments and they have not. That's the problem. This gyroscope is not science. It's not an experiment. Science hasn't proved the ether. Science is very narrow. And that term, which we've all been trained, correctly so, proves things. When it's used incorrectly, no offense, Bob, we're all guilty of this. I'm not trying to single you out. But we're all guilty when we say we've done an experiment. Science says. Because it doesn't. Just a method.
Okay, well, you know what? Whatever the terminology is, Nathan, I mean, I get it. And like I said, I've already capitulated the idea that this is not an experiment, it's an observation. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a video that basically kind of explains, and whether or not you want to agree that it's the Sagnac experiment or not, it is an explanation for essentially where we're getting our technology from today. Okay, so let's go ahead and give this a listen. Fine, it's not an experiment. Great, I capitulate that. Let's hear the explanation.
It doesn't prove anything, Bob. It doesn't prove anything. It's going to be the words of man.
Nathan, look, if you're going to interrupt me on my show, then maybe it is time for you to go, because this argument is getting ridiculous. All right?
Yes.
It is getting over the top ridiculous.
He's already gone.
He
Bob.
dropped. Okay. God, I can't, I understand where he's trying to go with this, but this is absolutely preposterous. We have this technology, we have tons of technology that is in existence today, and whether or not it came about by his strict definition of a scientific experiment and hypothesis and all of this, stuff, I don't know. What I do know is that this is proven technology. And, whether he wants to call this an experiment or not, this is wound up as a battle of semantics. And honestly, I understand where a lot of the ballers are feeling their frustration, and it's great. It's funny to watch them get subjected to it. But the reality is look, it's existing technology. We use it to measure things. And the subject of today's show is about what is it that we are measuring. Okay. And Nathan, I'm sorry you rage quit on this, but you don't know when to stop on a point. And you're not going to pull that on my show. I'm sorry. I came here, I let you come here, I gave you your say, but you're really being quite disrespectful, especially when we have capitulated the idea that, okay, maybe what Rick did is not necessarily considered an experiment. However, I think that, we were able to vary some of the variables, and, whether you want to fit them into the most strictest definition or not, that's you, but you're certainly no scientist, Nathan. You're just not. Okay. So whatever science it was that got us to where we are today, and whether or not it used this strict scientific method and adherence to it, I don't know. But what I do know is that it works. It's existing technology. And if you want to say it's all bullshit and none of it is true, then that only makes you look ignorant. Okay. So hey, Mike, did you have something else to say on that?
No, it's ridiculous. It's a measuring device. We're using instruments to measure or test something. I think I made it very clear that, especially me, never said that using a gyroscope is an experiment. And getting so bent over on terminology used that, I never said it. And, we already both capitulated the fact that it's not a scientific experiment. Right. It's just a measuring device.
Right. And apparently there can be no experiments done with gyroscopes, from what I'm gathering. But whatever.
Well, what if you take a mechanical gyro and spin it up? You predict that if the Earth is spinning, you should see this precession or this drift. And when you spin up the gyro and allow it to, spin free in its gimbals or whatever, and there is no precession, there is no drift, I wouldn't say that that necessarily proves that the Earth isn't spinning, although it certainly doesn't provide any evidence that it is, and it is good circumstantial evidence to point towards the Earth being stationary. Now, when you find this precession or drift with a fiber optic gyro, to me, I don't see why is the big hang up on the semantics of the word experiment. But I guess I kind of get his point, but I don't see why it has to get so volatile. But hey,
I don't either.
I guess we do have to be careful about what we call an experiment and such. But
it's not that, John. When somebody's putting words in my mouth that I didn't say, I'm going to say something back. And I don't respect that of Nathan, that he said that I say it's an experiment. I didn't. So
yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Let's continue. We got a beautiful gyroscope to demonstrate.
yeah, we do. But before we get to that, let me go ahead and just play a little bit about the Sagnac experiment, which is the theory behind the fiber optic and ring laser gyro technology that he's used every single day. Okay, so let's give this a listen.